Hello and welcome back to the Change Your Life podcast. My name is Dwight Gillespie. I'm your host, and I want to welcome you to today's episode. If you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. I'd like to thank you for staying with us. I wanted to take a minute and let you know, we do a bunch of these on one day at a time, and we do like 4 or 5 in a day. So if you see that I don't change my shirt necessarily, it's not because I'm, only have one shirt. It's just because we're doing them all in one day. And I feel obligated to tell you that because I noticed that through the videos that, you see the same shirt. Anyway. Today, what we're going to talk about is 4 ways that you can combat depression. And I want to start right now by saying that if you do suffer from depression and you're contemplating some very dark things, I want to let you know that the National Suicide Hotline, and we'll put the number below, is at 1-800-273-8255. I'm going to speak from my experience. I suffered from depression throughout my life. I haven't had a serious bout of depression in quite some time, I'll tell you that. But I have been institutionalized for it on 3 occasions in my life. And it has been a big problem for me in the past. So I tell you these things from experience. Depression is horrible, and people don't really get it. Oh, just get over it or whatever. But there are things. I came to a point in my life, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I had always been given suggestions, and I didn't always take them. You don't understand was a big thing for me. But some of the things that people would say would be, number one is move a muscle, right? To move a muscle. I would lay on my couch and I would be depressed. And I mean, for days, even weeks at a time. And thankfully I had a good union job and I was afforded that time. But anyway, I would lay there and I wouldn't do anything. And I would just be in my own head. And people would tell me, come on, let's go for a walk. Let's get up and go for a walk. Let's go, you should get up and take a shower. Because, I don't know if you've been there, but there have been times where I wouldn't bathe. I wouldn't do anything. It was just the depression was unbelievable. And many of you who follow this podcast, you know what I've been through, especially with the loss of my kids. After that, it was prevalent in my life, more than ever. The depression really, really, really hit me hard. And the idea of the importance of bathing and things like it just wasn't important to me. I mean, I was really lost in it. But these were things that that definitely help to come out of a depression is to change that thought, to get up and to take that shower, to take a walk around the block, get some fresh air. That's a really good way to help with the depression. And that was the second thing, was to change the thought, that constant tape that you play in your head of whatever it is that you're going through. There's something that said, and it's from a book that I know and I love it. It says, that we focus on anything that isn't going our way and ignore all the beauties in our life. And I didn't write that. That was Jimmy Kennan wrote that, I think. And the thing is, the ability to really to hyper focus on what isn't going well and to ignore everything else. I had that ability, and I mean, look, some of these things seem insurmountable at the time, and it's focusing on that one thing. Changing that thought is very important. Watch funny movies. That was a big thing too. It's really hard to be as depressed when you're watching, the Marx Brothers or a good Mel Brooks movie or whatever, modern people watch these days. And everything I mentioned is like 60 years old, but they're funny movies nonetheless. You put the producers on, I don't care what's going on, you're going to have to laugh. Young Frankenstein as well. So you change that thought. You do things that are conducive to smiling and laughing, and it's very hard to stay depressed sometimes when you're doing that. The third thing that I say is to make a gratitude list. And I'm going to talk about this in another episode because it's worth a whole episode in itself, I think. But gratitude lists are very important. I say that, that focusing on whatever isn't going right and ignoring everything that is. Because it's a funny thing, especially for us in the West here, we have things that we take for granted that other people go to bed in want for every night. I mean, millions of people around the world. If you woke up this morning and you were in a warm, dry place, and you had at least some food to eat, and you had clean clothes to put on, you're doing better than a lot of other people. And even if that gratitude is that, and the funny thing is, I grew up in an area, as long as you got your health, and as I get older, I realize how important that is, to have my health. And these are things that I can be grateful for at any given time. And I know it sounds corny, right? People say, oh, you don't understand. You don't understand. I do understand. I understand very well. But to be grateful for what is going well is just as important. And that brings me to my last thing. And it sounds simplistic, but it's not. Because when you're in a moment, especially for younger people, I think that this was much more prevalent for me when I was young. When I was young, it seemed like everything that I was feeling was going to be forever. Whether I was in a good mood or a bad mood, this was going to be it. It was never going to get any worse, or it was never going to get any better until it did. And it took me a long time to realize one of my favorite sayings, cliche as it is this too shall pass. I remember when my son passed away, it was difficult. We got into a car accident, and he passed away that night, and that was November 1st. He passed away the early morning of November 2nd. And my wife was pregnant with my daughter, Gabrielle, and we lost her 6 weeks later. And I remember, for that 6 weeks, I had to focus on the baby because my wife, she had, she broke her back, she crushed her foot, so we had a lot going on still, and I knew I had to be there for the baby. She wasn't going to be able to, and emotionally, I think that she was kind of, distant from it as well. So I had this to focus on, and I remember when we lost the baby, and it was that day, and that was December 15th, 2005. But who's counting, right? And it was the day I planned on committing suicide, and it was a very dark day. I talk about it in my book, which I didn't plug. I can't believe I didn't plug the book, right? The book will be out April 28th, and this podcast will probably actually be out after that. But the book is called Price Tags, and you can pick it up at either Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, any of those places, retailers who sell books. But in the book, I talk about that particular day and going out to my garage. And my wife's bed was actually right here. This is my office space now, but we had a hospital bed put in for her right here. And I remember, we went out. She unfortunately had to have this horrible procedure done to remove the fetus, and it just wasn't viable, and it was just a really, really bad day. And I attempted to hang myself that day, and it was a very, very bad day. And I remember sitting there on the garage floor, just writhing in pain. And I mean, I had so much emotional and spiritual pain that my body just ached. I mean, everything just ached. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how is this ever going to get any better? How am I ever going to be able to deal with this? The kids are never coming back. Like, this is a forever thing, right? This is another thing that I realized through this is that, like, the only thing that I really have to deal with is death. I think that's all any human really has to deal with when it comes to depression is death, because death is the only forever thing. I mean, you can lose an apartment, you can lose a job, you can even lose a lover. I mean, all of these are replaceable. And even with, your lover, you lose your lover, as long as you're both still alive, there's always a chance for reconciliation. Usually, you don't want it. But anyway, that's another topic entirely. But as long as you're there, people are there, there's always a chance for it. Death is the only permanence. And I remember sitting there and saying, Jesus, like, this is never going to get any better. And I'll be honest with you, it took a long time. It took a long time to heal from those wounds. I have a friend who says that these are all scars on the soul, but before something can scar over, it has to be an open wound. And these were open wounds, and I remember sitting there and when we lost the baby and saying to myself, like, this is enough already. I went through, my father had committed suicide when I was a kid. My mother and I had a horrible relationship. The woman didn't like me, and truth be told, I wasn't too keen on her. And then losing the kids, and I went through a horrible divorce before that. And, I had all of these things, and they had all built up, and these were all going to be forever things. These were all going to be, oh, this is my life. How's it, And gradually, through a lot of hard work and through a lot of love and understanding from friends and from professional people, and I sought a lot of professional help in this, and I highly recommend the same. I don't ever recommend people doing this and combating this stuff on your own. Like, I get it. I get what depression is all about. People, you don't understand. I do. Like, I understand. And depression sucks the most because people don't see it. But I can tell you that from my own perspective, depression became something that I became addicted to because I didn't want to do any of those things I just mentioned. I didn't want to move a muscle. I didn't want to change a thought. I didn't want to be grateful for anything. And I sure as heck didn't want you to tell me that this is going to pass. What do you mean it's going to pass? How's it going to pass? Just because I didn't understand it. I went through a period, and it was a transitionary. The 5 stages of grief, and you can look that up. I'm probably going to do a podcast on that as well. But getting to that acceptance part took a lot of time, but it came. The acceptance finally came. And when it came, I could deal with it and I can put it. And it doesn't mean that I don't miss the kids, especially my son. I didn't know my daughter. I'm sure I would have loved her every bit as much as I love my son. What it does is put things in perspective for me and says, this happened. My personal beliefs are, I guess, not important in this matter. You know that? And I'll say that because I don't want to cloud everything with that. I can tell you that I came to an understanding and I came to an acceptance with all of these things that have happened in my life, and that I still have purpose and I still have meaning. If nothing else, maybe just to pass on to you, to say that these things are not just survivable, they're thrivable, that you can grow through them. And I know I've talked about this, but how many times have I talked about Viktor Frankl, right? Man's Search for Meaning. And I've read that book several times. It's such a wonderful book because, Viktor Frankl spent time in Dachau and Auschwitz and all these horrible, horrible places and survived them by understanding that there's a greater purpose to life. And that it's our job, our obligation to understand that we have purpose and meaning. I'm of the personal belief that we're not always given the gift of knowing what that purpose and meaning is. And you can see in my other podcasts, I talk about it in length, but that it's there. And if you really want to combat this depression, I can tell you from one person who suffered to another, right? If you're suffering from this, and again, I want to make you aware that the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Please, if you're feeling that way, please give them a call. Again, 1-800-273-8255. All right, and they're always there. And I don't belittle your pain. I don't belittle your depression. I am saying, though, that it will look better if you just keep moving through it. As I said, I went through a period of time where I went from just being miserable all the time and not even being able to laugh. Like I felt guilty for laughing, like that I was going to enjoy life and my son was gone. I went from that to understanding how fortunate I was to have had him in the first place. And it brought up that Theodore Geisel. One of my favorite things is don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. But that doesn't happen overnight, folks. And when you're striving to get to that point, these are the things that you can do. I want to thank you for joining me today. You can email me at dwightgillespieauthor@gmail.com. You have my podcast is right here. I have my website. Come and say hello and have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening. Be well.